and hopefully welcome back to this third episode of 4, where I'm speaking to Dr. Calvin Lawrence. In today's episode, we're talking about resilience and setbacks, especially in your professional career as an educator. One reason that I do these interviews with educators is to bring the stories, struggles, and wisdom of educators who have gone through their profession, their career, all these experiences to the teachers and the advocates for improvement in education so that we can align on our vision for what school looks like in the future. And my returning guest is Dr. Calvin Lawrence. He has served in all kinds of roles across his 40-year career in education, including being a special education teacher, a university professor, and a principal. And Dr. Lawrence is really focused in on people, but he also recognizes that sometimes relationships with people need a moment of rest. And he tells some of these stories from his life in his new memoir, The Happy Leader, which is a soul-facing guide for anyone who's trying to navigate life and leadership with care and connection as their guiding lights. Dr. Calvin Lawrence now runs Calvin Lawrence Speaks, where he talks about leadership, diversity, and motivation to many different audiences. And if you don't already know, hi, I'm Christina Kottman. I'm a former elementary educator, and I love exploring what's already working in education. Thank you, Dr. Calvin Lawrence, for joining us again. And this episode is going to be a little emotional and a little raw because we're going to talk about the emotional setbacks that educators, professionals who give a lot of their energy and purpose and passion into their careers might experience, particularly when those lonely seasons happen where you feel rejected or, passed over, not considered, or just like you're constantly running forward, but nobody's seeing all of the passion and effort you're putting in. So in this wonderful book that you have written, The Happy Leader, you tell a very powerful story about when you're working as a director of diversity at a university in Texas, and many things happen that shift this sense of self-worth and belief in your purpose. So take us back to that moment and let's emotionally sit with this challenge.
Well, you picked a tough one, Christina. I almost want to go back even further to the first one, if I can, before I try to deal with that, if that's all right. And the first one, I think, it was 5 years into my career. So it's kind of like they talk about the 7-year itch. I don't know if that's a truism or not, but 5-year itch, I guess I'll do that. And about 5 years in, I really was not sure if I wanted to continue with education, stay in the field, stay in what I was doing. And I was, 5 years out of Madison. So, I think when you look at it from that standpoint, you're thinking, well, if I'm going to change career fields or whatnot, this is the perfect time to do it, right? I'm only 28. I can still do it. I'm still young enough that they'll look at me as being, viable. And so, but real quick, I had this epiphany that happened when I applied for this law enforcement role. And a friend of mine had gotten me a chance. And what it was that if you've seen the NCIS, it was basically that organization. I had applied and I was in the fourth of maybe 5 or 6 interview levels. Because even back then with that particular role, they wanted to make sure that the candidates they got were really gung-ho about doing what they were doing. I knew I had all the physical attributes. I thought I had the mental attributes. But one day the guy told me at that fourth interview level, he said it, and I'll never forget, everyone can't do what you do, which was everyone can't teach. And I was still on the path because they hadn't charted me off or written me off, and I could have gone to the next level, but I never came back. I wasn't even savvy enough to go and say thank you, but no thank you. I just never showed back up. That's a sad indictment on how immature I was at the time. But I had enough maturity to know that everyone couldn't do what I did. And it really was an epiphany. I had to flip my thinking. Okay, if I'm going to stay in education, then there must be more to it. And there's a deeper story to that that got me to the point where I was despairing to that level that I wanted to get out. But I made the switch and I turned, and I'm real thankful. When it comes to the time with regards to not making tenure, which was a huge thing, it still is a huge thing in higher education. And I had started out as a K-12 guy. And I think part of the reason that maybe it didn't hit me as hard as some people was because something that we said earlier, that I kind of understand I have options. And I made a decision when my research wasn't where it needed to be to spend more time with my son and to have more time with family as opposed to doing the research. And there's some more to it, but so it didn't hurt me as badly. And it also, because I had done so many different things, it was like you have opportunities, you have other options. You can go back to that. One role does not define you. And I still look back on those years fondly because there were some things that I learned and gleaned during that time that will maybe even help me in any future roles that I may have. Who knows? One day I may run for a school board. And because I've done higher ed, community college, K through 12, all the way through K through 12, it kind of gives me a perspective that a lot of people who've only done higher ed or who've only done the university level or who've only done maybe elementary or middle or high don't have. So I kind of have a tendency to look at the things on the bright side, and maybe, and it's not a Pollyanna way of looking at it. It's like maybe that was that for a season. Maybe that was just a reason. There was a reason for you to be there for a period of time. Also, in my educational journey, my path that I've traveled, that I spent 8 months as the principal at a juvenile correction center. And to be able to see that piece on the inside, it's one thing to volunteer, because I had volunteered before years prior, had been sort of like a juvie chaplain and going in and, done. But to be actually there and the bars closed and the doors shut and you're there from 8 to 5 or whatever the time frames were, that's a whole different picture. And then to be able to see maybe where the system has failed students and why it's failing students and why maybe still failing students. I needed to see that. I needed to see that to be able to talk about it from an educated standpoint, from a viewpoint, but to have that. So there are times when I look at things like that, Christina, it's like, what did we say? The resilience to setbacks can be really, really learning opportunities. We said this earlier, opportunities for growth. That was an opportunity for growth, the time that I spent at that particular Texas university. The opportunity for growth at that particular juvenile institution, those and the opportunity to grow when we talked about earlier, the charter school time period, which gave me an idea. You can read certain things about something, but it's one thing to read about it from someone else's perspective. It's another thing to be able to actually be there. Somebody could tell you about Rio de Janeiro, but you're there. You're in a place and you understand now. You see the culture, you see and so it's kind of like that. So I've taken this whole route, and I'm like this too, Christina. I don't have a lot of regrets in my life, for maybe a lot of reasons, but it's like I've had that, push on from that, keep going. There are good things that I've learned, and sometimes even with through failure, sometimes, yeah, I don't know if you're a Star Wars girl, but Yoda had this saying about failure, the best teacher is, because Yoda's got to say everything in reverse. Mm-hmm. So failure is the best teacher, basically. And there's a lot of truth to that, truisms to that, because you can have a lot of successes and learn maybe a little bit, but the first time you really stub your toe. If you think about it, children who learn how to crawl, then walk, then run, I mean, that whole process is a failure process, right? You try to stand up, you fall. You stand up, you fall. You take a little step, yeah, and then before you know it, you're walking. And so for me, it's been I've been that kind of guy really all my life. I'm the late bloomer. I have to remember that. Sometimes I forget it myself, but it's like I have to get to that point, and then I say, "Oh yeah, I was that person for a reason." I had that window of time. It was a really good window of time. It gives me another perspective on life. Gives me another perspective with working with people. Now, Christine, it gives me another perspective of working with leaders, because I can talk to leaders and they can say, this guy might know what he's talking about because he went through some of that stuff and he's seen it. It's not just theoretical. It's not just a framework that he read or he put together. He actually was able to see it as well as all the other stuff and seeing the research. So I look at it from that standpoint. I look at it as being, I was grateful for the time that I have there. And everywhere I've been, I still have friends and people who I've connected with. So that's a richer network than I would have never had I stayed in the one place. Maybe if I had stayed in Virginia, who knows what have happened? It might have been decent, but I don't have that regret. And I'm still working on that. Hopefully influence as many people as possible. And you're kind of doing the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's making me think a lot about the impact of those seasons on our lives and the mindset that we go through when we're processing it. Because it's almost like finding the silver lining in those really challenging experiences. And one thing I've always found helpful for me of, leaving a relationship or transition to a different job has been, maybe I was supposed to be here just for one of the people that I connected with, just for that one student who needed me to be their teacher, for that one colleague who was able to rely on me at that one moment. And that it kind of frees up this feeling that I was responsible for being, the best I ever could be. And maybe it was like I was supposed to be at that school at that moment for that one individual person in that one exact instance. And it's also the mindset of like, you can't be everything for everybody. You also have to take care of yourself. And one thing I really emphasize when I talk to teachers is you can't pour from an empty bucket. So when you're not focusing in on your well-being and taking care of yourself, and not like yoga and meditation, but really the way you speak to yourself, the way you process experiences, that's how you show up in the world. And when you have this challenge of going through a setback or having to be resilient through a transition, it shows up in the way that you present yourself to the world and the way that you speak to yourself. And that energy resonates with other people. So when you can see it as, I was able to be here for a significant purpose, I might not be able to see it until after, and I might not be able to share the story until the wound has healed and become a scar, but I eventually will be able to share it. I eventually will be able to mentor someone and share my experience and stories so that they can have an impact.
Right. I love that. When you say that, and I think about being somewhere for a season, and that's the kind of the term I have come to start using. Maybe I was there at that particular school when that one student came and asked me about and told me about possible suicide. Maybe I needed to be there just for that. If not for that, just for that. And there's a reason for being there. I think about the other two places that I shared at that university and at the juvenile correction center. And I think about a boy that was at one of the juvenile correction centers, and probably maybe a little bit to this day. I mean, he's kept up with me. He tried to become my Facebook friend, but he's out now. He's doing really good. Brilliant kid, just tracked the wrong way. And so it's like, maybe you needed to be there for him, for his parents, for his brother, for his mom. You need to be there to help him with some stability and get him back on the right track. And so if you look at it from that standpoint, then you don't despair about what you lost. You really focus so much more on what you gained. You gained so much, and who knows how much somebody else has gained because you were there.
Exactly. And this is one reason I love the framing that you put in the book of calling it a wilderness. And it creates such a human visual connection to being lost in the woods or having to survive by the campfire, hunt for your own food, figure out a shelter. because you really are in this moment of survival. So can we go into the talk about the human aspect of processing the grief of a loss or a setback or a challenge, and why wilderness really sets up that framing that makes so much sense?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a time like you kind of spelled it out a bit. When I think of those really harsh times, it's like being somewhere where you're alone. Now, it's funny because I say all this stuff about connecting with people and whatnot, but at the face of the moment, you don't think about those other people a lot of times. You think I'm I'm here, I'm doing this, I'm there, and then you have to turn maybe your attention to, but who can help me? Because you're in this place. It's a desert place, it's a wilderness place. You've got trees, you've got surroundings you're not familiar with. If somebody lets you go from a position or a role or title, whatever, you're in an unfamiliar place, unfamiliar territory. All these emotions come. And then who knows if there's other stuff going on, like, I'll give you one. So in one of the situations, I won't name it, but my mom was going through health issues before she passed away. So you're focusing on that as opposed to the other thing. And it makes it very difficult. Then who do I turn to? Who do I trust? But I think what helped me was that after the initial, I'm all by myself. And then it's no, I'm not by myself. I have people that I can turn to. I have people who are checking in on me. I have people who want me to do well. They want me to get to the next, whatever it is. And then they help guide you out of that wilderness situation. So I'm only in there for a little while. Thankfully, I am. And then I'm moving on to where I can focus on helping serve other people. Because almost always, Christina, it comes down to who can I help now? I get off of the pity party or the whatever you want to call that, and you move on into whatever that will help someone else. And really, then those things that were major things become very small again because you don't focus on that. I think we have a tendency when we focus on ourselves that we make the issue bigger than maybe even it should be. And someone else can come along and help you to really see the reality of it. The sun's gonna shine tomorrow. You're gonna get up tomorrow. You're gonna have another day, and you're gonna have this. You're gonna have another opportunity. Just keep doing what you do.
And being present as well. I was even imagining, like, when you're in the physical wilderness, you can see the stars in a way that you couldn't when you're in the city, when you are surrounded by all of the other complexity of the world. And it is that our minds create this trap and this fear of, I'm alone, I can't do it, the whole world has rejected me. But that's a story. And when we get in community with other people, they can counteract that story. They can show us that actually we have a lot of things happening in our lives. We have a lot more that we could be doing, especially to bring ourselves into relationships with others and into a space where we can process the setback in a healthy way. I think it also makes me think a lot about the system of education and how we do have a lot of educators at this current moment who are facing burnout and overwhelm and exhaustion. And part of that is the system that rewards metrics over meaning. And thinking particularly about your story about needing scholarship and research to be prioritized in academia. So how would you suggest that an educator who's feeling really stuck in the complexity of the system process their emotions?
How would I have them process their emotions? Again, sometimes you need a little help and an assistive person, someone who can come alongside to help you kind of. And luckily, Christina, I've always had people who have been there for me. Whether it's like, let's go out to lunch, let's do this, give me a call, we need to talk. But that's the way to do it. You can't do life by yourself. I gotta go back to that old adage about life is too difficult to do by yourself. You need these other people, and it could be a spouse, it could be a significant other, it could be a great friend, a good trusted friend. It could be a colleague who's trusted. It could be anyone. But you need those people alongside to get you to where you need to be, to get you through that path, through that wilderness, through that whatever that misery is, to where you see the light and you see what needs to be done, and you start doing it. You start moving on, and you're not trapped, and you're not paralyzed with that type of whatever you want to call it, fear or whatever.
Exactly. And I think there's a lot of emphasis on just trying to go forward, continue to be on that hamster wheel, but you really cannot become the leader that you want to be. You cannot have the impact that you want to have on learners and on other folks in your sphere of influence when you are hurting and you need a moment to pause and heal. And I think that's a really important thing for educators and caregivers overall in very caring professions to reflect on, that when you are processing, it might not be the right moment for you to try to go out and serve others, because maybe it's the opportunity to ask them to serve you. There's a great talk by Simon Sinek where he talks about the opportunity to ask his friends for help. And that when you don't reach out to your friends, when you are hurting and in that moment of turmoil, you're actually stealing the opportunity for them to be your guides and give you that love and support. So it kind of flips the narrative from, oh, I'm burdening them, which is, the process that we always have going on in our head. I'm being a burden to others. I'm calling them to waste their time with me. The way Simon Sinek says it, exactly, he's like, no, you are actively allowing them to be your friend. And that's what they want. They want to be able to help you. So this reaching out to others and being able to support in that moment is really crucial.
You said it. So going back, you can't pour from the empty cup. And I didn't know that Simon Sinek had said that, but it's really that there are, people have that tendency to not want to infringe upon someone else's time, or to not to burden them with their burden or whatever. But it's really what the true friend or true mentors really want to. That's why it's almost like that's why we're here. We're here to help bear each other's burdens, right? So when you're ready, because people have these times, and everyone grieves or has, differently, whether it's a lost one or whether it's a lost job or whatever. People grieve their setbacks differently and at different rates. And what I also goes back to that relationship in terms of knowing your people, knowing maybe when the time is right to give them a call, knowing when the time is right to come alongside. Sometimes you just send them a little something and say, when you're ready, I'm here to talk. You just let them know, because sometimes you don't know, but you want them to know that you're always ready and willing and able when it happens. But yeah, I love that.
I mean, that takes me to the last question I was going to ask you, of if you could go back and visit your past self in one of those tough seasons, in one of those wilderness moments. Like, you could pop out of the woods and be like, hello, past Galvin, here's what you need to hear. What would you tell that person? Like, what would be the message? Because obviously inviting people to have the conversation opens the door, but once they're standing in front of you, how do you meet them in that season?
Well, that one this is going to sound funny, but that's a real easy one. Maybe one of the easiest questions you've given me today, by the way. And that is the one that is, I would tell myself, it's going to be okay. And I think about this kind of like the David and Goliath story. David had beaten a lion and beaten a bear, and it set him up for beating a giant. And that's a great analogy, because you got these giants in your life that are really, you feel like you can't overcome it. But if I were able to go back and tell myself something, it's like, you will overcome so much. I'd have to say it that way because it's in the future tense. You don't have to worry about anything right now. Just keep doing what you do. Get ready and get willing and get right when you need to. You have mentors that you haven't even called upon yet. Call on them when you're ready. And I think I'll be ready quicker than most, because I need the help. I realize that I need the help. And then just go with it. Just go and then do your service thing. And when you're ready to do that, You're going to be okay. And I would just leave it at that. I wouldn't have to be a long soliloquy. It would be something very simple, just like that, because of what I have been able to do. And it's not a brag on me. Even when I wrote the book, it's like the thing is the people that have helped me have been so great that I cannot help but do something with my life or do some of these things because I've had so many great people, if that makes sense. And so even when I call out the names of some of the people, I call out a couple of JMU folks. I haven't even begun to touch the surface on some of them yet. But when I think about all of that, it's like, oh, yeah, it's going to be all right. It's going to be okay. Even now, at this point in my life, there's more things. I told somebody, I said, I'm not out of juice. I'm not done yet. I got a lot more in me to do. Now it's just a matter of figuring out where I want to plug in and where I want to do it. And then we're going to do it. We're going to do it to the degree that I can do it.
Exactly. Oh, it's so healing to even hear you're going to overcome this. This is
Right.
not the end. This is a beginning. This is a new chapter. And I think I'll end this episode by saying what my advice would be, because this is one of the lines that I go back to when I talk to educators and teachers and colleagues and friends. It's that burnout and exhaustion doesn't mean that you're weak. It means that you've been strong for too long and you've been pushing through a wall that you weren't meant to push through alone. So when we go back to community, when we go back into these moments of turmoil, it is resetting and recognizing that you might need a moment for yourself. And then there are people waiting to support you, including your future self.
Right.
Wonderful. Well, our last conversation is going to be all about JMU because we're theming it.
Yes.
I know.
I'm ready for it.
Yeah, we're going to talk about being the change and starting where you are. Referencing back to that Arthur Ashe quote you already referenced, I'm going to pull that back again. And we're going to talk a little bit about fitness and staying healthy and making your brain work for you. So if you're an educator or an advocate for change in education, thank you for being here for our conversation with Dr. Calvin Lawrence. And we have one more fantastic episode for you. In the meantime, make sure you check out his website and connect with all the mentors in your life. Send them a quick message and say, thank you for all that you do. All right, we'll see you in the next episode.